Hey everyone, tonight we travel to a place where the wind doesn't just bite, it gnaws, and the ground holds its breath for millennia. Imagine standing on a vast, silent plateau, surrounded by the golden peaks of the Altai Mountains. The air is so thin and crisp it feels like you're breathing crushed diamonds, and the only sound is the whisper of grass that has been frozen, thawed, and frozen again for thousands of years. This is a land that is as harsh as it is beautiful, and frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a week here without a heavily insulated yurt and a lifetime of experience. The people we're about to meet had both. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find others who appreciate these quiet journeys into the past. And as always, I'd love to see where and when you're listening from, so feel free to post your city and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the heart of Siberia, on a stretch of land that serves as a crossroads for Russia, China, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan. It feels like the top of the world, a place forgotten by the frantic pace of modern life. You pull the collar of your coat tighter, but the cold here is different. It's not a temporary chill. It's a permanent state of being that radiates from the very earth beneath your boots. That ground is called permafrost, soil, gravel, and rock that has remained at or below 0 degrees C, 32 degrees C, for at least 2 consecutive years. But in this part of the world, 2 years is a comical understatement. Here, the frost is ancient, a geological memory bank that has locked away secrets for hundreds, even thousands of years. It is nature's perfect freezer. Think about what an archaeologist usually finds. They unearth fragments of pottery, the ghostly outline of a wooden post, a corroded bronze pin, and bones. Always bones. They are the durable, inorganic remnants of a life, the full stop at the end of a sentence. From these, we piece together a story. But here, in the Altai, the permafrost didn't just preserve the full stop, it preserved the entire page. It didn't just save the skeleton, it saved the skin, the hair, the muscle tissue, the intricate tattoos etched upon that skin, the silk shirt the person wore, the felt stockings on their feet, and even the last meal resting in their stomach. It is the difference between finding a blueprint of a house and walking into the house on the day the owners left, with a meal still on the table and clothes folded in a chest. The people who left these astonishing time capsules belonged to a culture known as the Pazyryk, a subgroup of the wider Scythian peoples. The Scythians were a formidable confederation of nomadic tribes who thundered across the Eurasian steppe from roughly the 9th to the 2nd century BCE. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of them with a mixture of awe and terror, describing them as fierce, horse-riding warriors who drank from the skulls of their enemies. For a long time, these were just stories, the slightly breathless accounts of a settled civilization looking out at the barbarians on their borders. But the frozen tombs of the Pazyryk prove that, if anything, Herodotus may have understated their sophistication. Across the plateaus you can see them, low, unassuming hills dotting the landscape, looking like natural features, little bumps on the skin of the earth. These are the burial mounds known as kurgans. From the outside, they seem simple enough. But if you were to slice one open, you'd find a deep pit with a timber burial chamber at its base, like a log cabin built for eternity. Above this, the Pazyryk piled earth and, crucially, a large mound of loose stones. And here we find a wonderfully quirky piece of ancient engineering. Common sense might suggest that a tightly sealed tomb would be best for preservation. Instead, the Pazyryk created a porous mound of rubble. This seemingly simple choice had a miraculous effect. In the short, hot summers, the rocky mound heated up on the surface, but its jumbled nature prevented the heat from penetrating deep into the ground. In the long, brutal winters, the frigid air sank easily through the gaps in the stones, supercooling the earth below. This process, repeated year after year, created a permanent ice lens within the kurgan, a block of subterranean ice that encased the burial chamber and everything in it. This leads to a fascinating question, and historians still argue whether the Pazyryk people intentionally engineered their tombs to freeze, or if this remarkable preservation was a complete, miraculous accident of climate and construction. Did they possess a deep, intuitive understanding of thermodynamics, passed down through generations, allowing them to build these eternal freezers for their most revered dead? Or was it a colossal fluke, a case of their standard burial practices just happening to align perfectly with the unique climatic conditions of the High Altai? It is a bit like finding out your forgotten leftovers in the back of the freezer have become a perfectly preserved exhibit for some future food historian. Did you mean to do that? Probably not, but the result is the same. Whether by genius design or cosmic luck, these tombs became frozen windows, portals waiting to be opened. And for 2,500 years they lay dormant, locked in ice, waiting for the world to change around them until a modern curiosity would finally venture into the cold to knock on their frozen door. That knock on the frozen door comes in the summer of 1993. It's not a loud, dramatic bang, but a patient, methodical series of taps made by the trowel of a Russian archaeologist named Natalia Polosmak. You are there with her and her team from the Russian Academy of Sciences. You have traveled for days, first by plane, then by rumbling truck, and finally by helicopter to reach this place, the Ukok Plateau. It's a landscape that feels both holy and hostile. Local Altai people consider it a sacred place, the second highest layer of the heavens where their ancestors rest. It's a vast rolling pastureland cradled by snow-dusted peaks, a place where winter holds on with stubborn fingers, often sending snowstorms to visit even in June. The air is thin, the work is hard, and the isolation is absolute. Forget Wi-Fi. You're lucky if the two-way radio works. Polosmak's goal is to study the Pazyryk culture, to understand how these nomads lived and died at the fringes of the great empires of the ancient world. The plateau is dotted with their kurgans, the silent hills you saw earlier. The problem is, you're not the first person to show an interest in what's inside them. For thousands of years, these tombs have been targets for looters. Finding an undisturbed kurgan is the archaeological equivalent of finding a winning lottery ticket that someone else dropped in the mud 2 millennia ago. Your team begins work on a few mounds, and the familiar story of discovery and disappointment plays out. You dig, you find the central pit, and you find the telltale signs of a looter's shaft. A narrow tunnel dug straight down into the heart of the tomb, just big enough for a person to slither through and grab whatever they could. This was a shockingly common fate for Scythian burials. The amount of gold and valuable goods packed into these tombs made them irresistible targets. This is a well-established historical fact. The people who built these kurgans knew the risks, but the spiritual necessity of providing for their dead in the next life outweighed the near certainty of future desecration. After a few dispiriting finds, Polosmak decides on a change of strategy. Instead of focusing on the largest, most prominent kurgans, the ones that scream important chieftain with lots of gold inside, she turns her attention to a smaller, more modest-looking mound. It's part of a row of 5, and it seems almost deliberately underwhelming. The logic is sound. Maybe, just maybe, the ancient thieves were in a hurry and went for the obvious targets, leaving this smaller prize alone. So, you and the team begin the backbreaking work of removing the heavy mantle of stones and earth. The sun beats down, but the air remains cold. Days pass in a rhythm of digging, sifting, and mapping. You clear the fill from the main burial shaft, a rectangle about 12 feet deep. Near the bottom, you find the remains of a later secondary burial, just a skeleton with a few items. It's interesting, but not the prize you're looking for. Then your trowel hits something that doesn't feel like dirt or rock. It's hard, unyielding, and slick. You scrape away more soil, and there it is. A dull, gray, opaque surface. It's ice. You've breached the cold trap. You've found the ice lens you learned about, the accidental miracle of preservation. The mood of the entire camp shifts. The disappointment evaporates, replaced by a surge of electric anticipation. But this is where the real challenge begins. You can't just chip away at the ice with picks and shovels. You'd destroy whatever is frozen inside. The only way to proceed is to melt it, millimeter by painstaking millimeter. This becomes your new, slightly absurd reality. You're in the middle of the Siberian wilderness, essentially trying to defrost a giant 2,500-year-old freezer with what amounts to a kettle. Buckets of water are heated over a campfire, carefully poured over a small section of the ice. and the meltwater is immediately sponged away before it can refreeze. It's a slow, agonizingly delicate process. Hours of work yield only inches of progress. As you work, you ponder the looters who almost got here first. Who were they? Archaeologists still debate whether the original looters were opportunistic thieves from other tribes, or if they were members of the same Pazyryk community, perhaps retrieving sacred items or disarming a powerful dead leader shortly after burial. The idea of insider looting is fascinating. It suggests a complex relationship with the dead, where a community might feel the need to reclaim powerful objects or even neutralize the spiritual influence of a recently deceased chieftain. Were they thieves, or were they performing a necessary ritual? The ice, for now, holds its own secrets. As the first few feet of the ice block are melted away, dark shapes begin to appear within its milky depths. They are large organic forms. Slowly, impossibly, the fully harnessed and saddled bodies of horses begin to emerge from their frozen slumber. Their leather tack is perfect, their bridles intact, their bodies completely preserved. They look as if they simply laid down for a nap and a freak frost caught them unawares. There are 6 of them, arranged neatly, silent guardians at the entrance to a deeper chamber. And if they went to this much trouble for the horses, you can only imagine what, or who, they were meant to guard. The sight of the 6 horses emerging from the ice like mythological beasts from a frozen lake holds you and the entire team captive. This is a moment that transcends archaeology. It's pure magic. These are not skeletons. They are fully formed animals, their reddish-brown coats still retaining a hint of their living color. Their manes and tails neatly trimmed. You can see the muscle and sinew beneath their skin. They are guardians, sacrificed to accompany their mistress into the great beyond, and their owners equipped them for that journey in breathtaking style. You run a gloved finger over the intricate tack. The saddles are complex constructions of leather and felt, adorned with brightly colored appliques. But it's the carvings that steal your breath. Wooden cheek pieces have been expertly worked into the forms of winged griffins, their beaks open in a silent cry. Small plaques show stags with impossibly elaborate antlers that morph into the heads of birds. This is the Pazyryk animal style in all its glory, a swirling, dynamic art form that feels alive. It's like the ancient equivalent of a custom show car, where every single detail is a work of art, meant to display status and power. Removing them is a monumental task. Each horse, weighing hundreds of pounds and frozen solid, must be carefully documented, stabilized, and lifted from the tomb. It's a race against the clock. The same summer sun that makes the work bearable is also your enemy. Once these organic materials leave their icy cocoon, they begin to decay with alarming speed. The air itself becomes a threat. You work with a sense of urgent reverence, documenting every strap, every carved griffin, before these magnificent creatures are hoisted out and prepared for their long journey to the laboratory. Beneath the layer of sacrificed horses, you finally reach the main event, the roof of the burial chamber. It's a solid lid made of larch logs, sealed with birch bark. And beneath that, taking up almost the entire space, is the sarcophagus. It is immense, carved from the single massive trunk of a larch tree, a wood the Pazyryk clearly revered for its durability and scent. The lid is fastened with heavy bronze nails. You can feel the weight of 2,500 years of silence as the team prepares to open it. What will be inside? After all this effort, will you find it flooded and ruined, or worse, empty? The nails are pried loose, their groans echoing in the quiet of the pit. The heavy log lid is lifted away. Your first view is more ice. The sarcophagus is filled to the brim with a solid, cloudy block of it. There was no escaping the water that seeped into this tomb millennia ago. But far from destroying the contents, it became the final, crucial element of their preservation. Now, the delicate work of defrosting begins again, but on a smaller, more intimate scale. Instead of large buckets, you use smaller containers, pouring lukewarm water over the surface, sponging away the melt. Slowly, like a photograph developing in a dark room, an image begins to resolve in the icy water. First, you see the dark, organic shapes of felt and fur blankets. Then, a human form, lying on its side in a gentle, fetal curve, as if in a deep sleep. And as the last of the ice melts away from the body, you get your first proper look at the woman who has been sleeping here for 2.5 millennia. Her head is completely shaved, a stark and surprising detail. But resting beside her is an astonishingly complex wig or headdress. Her body is pale, the skin slightly puckered from its long immersion. She is tall for her time, around 5'6", and elegantly built. The preservation is simply stunning. This is possible because the Pazyryk practiced their own form of mummification. It wasn't the elaborate ritual of the Egyptians, but a practical process where the brain and internal organs were removed through small incisions. The cavities were cleaned and stuffed with dry grasses, herbs, and wool, and the skin was stitched back up with horsehair thread. This initial preparation, combined with the deep freeze, created the perfect conditions for her to survive the centuries. As the body is revealed, another sensation fills the air, one that no photograph can ever capture. The smell. It is not foul, not the sharp smell of recent decay, but a deep, earthy, complex aroma. The scent of damp wool, ancient leather, horsehide, and the faint, musty perfume of the dried grasses that pack her body. It's the smell of time itself, and let's just say it's a far cry from potpourri. As you take in this incredible scene, you notice dark, intricate lines swirling across her pale skin. On her shoulder, a fantastical creature, part deer, part griffin, unfurls its antlers. Tattoos. Her story is written on her very skin. Looking around the coffin, you see other objects beginning to emerge from the slushy ice. A small stone dish still holding coriander seeds, a hand mirror of polished metal in a wooden case, pieces of carved bone. And this raises a fundamental question of archaeology. Even today, scholars debate whether the objects placed in the tomb were personal possessions she used in life, or if they were purely funerary items, created specifically for the journey to the underworld. Was this her favorite mirror, or one made only to see her reflection in the afterlife? We may never know, but for now that question hangs in the cold Siberian air as you gaze upon the silent, tattooed woman in her icy bed. There she is, resting in the watery embrace of her ancient coffin. The immediate, irresistible question that floods your mind and the mind of every person on Polosmac's team is simple. Who was she? In the years that followed her discovery, the world's media would give her a catchy romantic title: the Siberian Ice Maiden, or more famously, the Princess of Ukok. It's a lovely name. It conjures images of fairy tale royalty, of a lost Siberian Camelot. The only problem is, it's almost certainly wrong. The term princess implies a specific structure of inherited dynastic monarchy, something straight out of medieval Europe. The Pazyryk, as far as we know, didn't have kings and queens in that sense. Their society was likely organized around powerful clan chieftains, whose authority might have been earned as much as it was inherited. Calling her a princess is a convenient shorthand, but it obscures a much more complex and interesting reality. It's a bit like calling a Silicon Valley CEO a baron. It sort of fits, but it misses the entire point. So if not a princess, then who? You start to piece together the evidence, and the first clue is her burial itself. The Pazyryk reserved these elaborate kurgan burials for the most important members of their society. The common people were buried in simpler flat graves that are much harder for archaeologists to find. The very existence of this massive, labor-intensive tomb is a statement. She mattered. Then you consider the 6 horses. In a nomadic culture built around horsemanship, a horse was the ultimate status symbol, your vehicle, your partner in war, and a primary measure of your family's wealth. Sacrificing one horse was a significant act. Sacrificing 6 beautiful, healthy animals decked out in unimaginably ornate gear was an extravagant, almost reckless display of power. It was a clear message to anyone who saw it, and to the gods who would receive her, that this was no ordinary person. You look at the coffin again, the enormous larch log. Felling that tree, hollowing it out with bronze or iron adzes, and moving it into place would have taken a team of skilled craftsmen many weeks. Larch was a valuable resource. You don't waste it on just anyone. This was a custom job, commissioned for a person of immense standing. This practice of grand burials is something the Greek historian Herodotus noted about the wider Scythian world. He wrote that when a king died, his people would embark on a massive, elaborate mourning ritual, sacrificing not just his horses but also his concubines, his cupbearer, his cook, and his messenger, burying them all around him to serve him in the afterlife. While our maiden's burial wasn't on that epic scale, it clearly springs from the same cultural wellspring, the belief that your status in death should reflect and even enhance your status in life. Then you look at her. She was young, only around 25 years old when she died, and as you examine her hands, you notice something striking. They are soft. Her fingernails are neat and manicured. These are not the calloused, work-worn hands of a woman who spent her days tanning hides, milking mares, or assembling and disassembling a heavy felt yurt. Her life was clearly different. She was separated from the daily grinding manual labor that was the reality for most of her people. This points to a specialized role, a life of privilege and purpose that did not require her to toil. Her very body, like the tomb around her, is a testament to her elevated rank. And then there's the matter of her shaved head, juxtaposed with the towering, elaborate wig and headdress found beside her. This wasn't a simple fashion choice. The headdress, a complex construction of felt, wood, and gold foil standing nearly 3 feet high, was a powerful symbolic object far too cumbersome for everyday life. It was a ceremonial crown, a marker of her sacred or social role. The shaved head itself is another potent clue. In countless cultures throughout history, shaving the head is a ritual act, signifying purity, mourning, or a transition into a sacred state. This combination suggests she held a position that was not just one of wealth but one of spiritual significance. So while her high status is undeniable, archaeologists and historians intensely debate her precise role. Was she a high-born noblewoman, a revered shaman or priestess, or perhaps a storyteller who held the collective memory of her people? Each of these roles is a possibility. She could have been the daughter or wife of a great chieftain, buried with all the splendor his wealth could afford. Or her status could have been her own, earned through a deep connection to the spirit world, a power that set her apart from everyone else. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, in a complex identity that our modern labels fail to capture. She was no simple princess. She was someone more mysterious, more powerful, and her story was just beginning to unfold. To truly grasp the mystery of the woman in the ice, you have to understand the world that created her. Her story is not just her own, it's the story of her people. So now, you pull back from the single, silent tomb, your focus zooming out like a satellite camera until the entire Ukok plateau is in view. You see the network of valleys and high-altitude grasslands, and across this rugged landscape, you see the camps of the Pazyryk, the people of the felt and the gold. They were a fiercely independent tribe of Iron Age nomads who thrived here from about the 6th to the 3rd century BCE. They were one thread in the vast, vibrant tapestry of Scythian culture that stretched across the Eurasian steppe, a world of nomadic horse lords who were the undisputed masters of this open country. While their cousins roamed the flat, endless grasslands of what is now Ukraine and southern Russia, the Pazyryk adapted to a more challenging environment, the mountains. Theirs was a life of vertical nomadism. This wasn't aimless wandering. It was a carefully planned seasonal rotation called transhumance. In the summer, you would have followed them as they drove their precious herds of sheep, goats, and horses up into the high alpine pastures like Ukok, where the grazing was rich and the air was free of the insects that plagued the lower valleys. As the first snows of autumn began to dust the peaks, you would descend with them to more sheltered winter camps, protected from the worst of the brutal Siberian winds. Their lives were dictated by the needs of their animals, because their animals were their life. The herds provided everything: meat for the pot, milk that was fermented into a nutritious, slightly alcoholic drink called kumis, wool and leather for clothing, and bone for tools and ornaments. A man's wealth was counted not in coins, but in hoofbeats. Their homes were masterpieces of portable architecture, the ancient ancestor of the modern yurt or ger. Imagine a circular lattice of willow wood that could be expanded like an accordion, with a sturdy door frame and a roof of wooden poles all converging on a central ring, left open to the sky as a smoke hole. This light skeleton was then covered in thick, heavy sheets of felt, making the home weatherproof, incredibly well insulated, and sturdy enough to withstand the steppe winds. It was the original mobile home, a cozy, self-contained world that could be dismantled, packed onto horses or carts, and reassembled in a new pasture in a matter of hours. The Pazyryk weren't just functional, they were artists, and their chosen canvases were the materials of their everyday life. They were absolute masters of felt. You might think of felt as something for craft projects, but in their hands, it became a medium for high art. They created enormous, vibrant wall hangings for their yurts and tombs, depicting swirling griffins and epic struggles between predators and prey, all rendered in brightly dyed, stitched-on pieces of felt. Their saddle blankets are some of the most beautiful textiles ever recovered from the ancient world. And among their creations, archaeologists found a few wonderfully strange and delicate objects. Life-sized, three-dimensional swans, sewn from felt and stuffed with deer hair, their long necks gracefully curved. Were they toys for a high-status child? Or were they potent religious symbols, perhaps soul birds meant to guide the deceased on their journey across a celestial river? We don't know, but their whimsical beauty speaks of a people with a rich inner life. Their other great medium was gold. They didn't mine it themselves but acquired it through trade, using a technique called repoussé. Their artisans would hammer thin sheets of gold foil over intricately carved wooden plaques, creating glittering ornaments that would have shimmered in the sun, adorning their clothes, and most importantly, the harnesses of their beloved horses. This combination of art, horse-centric culture, and specific types of weapons is what archaeologists call the Scythian triad. It's a cultural signature that links the Pazyryk to their distant cousins across the steppe, proving they were part of a vast, interconnected world. But it also raises questions about their spiritual life. Looking at their art, filled with spirits and animal transformations, anthropologists and archaeologists still debate the extent to which the Pazyryk worldview was shaped by shamanism versus a more structured pantheon of gods. Were there spiritual specialists, like the woman in the tomb healers who walked between worlds? Or were they priests who served a recognized family of deities? The answer likely lies somewhere in the complex swirl of their beliefs, a system as intricate as the designs on their golden plaques, governing every aspect of their journey through the rugged, beautiful world they called home. But what did it feel like to be Pazyryk? To live a life measured not by clocks and calendars, but by the rhythm of migrating herds and the turning of the seasons. Let's step past the felt flap of one of those yurts and spend a day in their world, some 2.5 millennia ago. You wake not to an alarm, but to the subtle shift in light as the sun begins to crest the distant mountains, its first rays filtering through the smoke hole at the peak of the yurt. The air is cool and smells of wood smoke from the embers of last night's fire, mingled with the earthy scent of livestock and damp wool. The interior of the yurt is a small, circular world of its own. Richly colored felt rugs cover the ground, their patterns swirling with stylized animals. Carved wooden chests hold the family's possessions. There is a place for everything, a nomadic efficiency born from the necessity of being able to pack up your entire life at a moment's notice. The first task is to coax the central fire back to life. This hearth is the heart of the home, its source of warmth and cooked food. As the camp slowly awakens, the day's work begins, largely divided by gender. You see the men and older boys, already on horseback, moving with a fluid grace that makes them seem like a single creature, a kind of steppe centaur. Their day is spent with the herds. They are protectors, guides, and veterinarians, all in one. You watch them drive the sheep to fresh pasture, their calls echoing in the crisp air. You see them tending to the all-important horses, checking for injuries, practicing their legendary archery from the saddle. Life in the saddle is all they know. For them, walking is a strange and inefficient way to get around. Back at the camp, it is a hive of female activity. You see women milking the mares, a tricky and demanding task, their hands moving with practiced speed. The milk is poured into leather bags to be churned into cheese, butter, and the famous kumis, the fermented, slightly effervescent mare's milk that is a staple of their diet. Let's just say it's an acquired taste. The most crucial task is making felt. This is not a solitary chore. It's a communal, physical, and noisy event. You watch as a group of women lay out layers of cleaned and fluffed wool onto a large hide, sprinkle it with water, and then roll the whole thing up tightly. They then spend hours rolling, kicking, and beating the bundle, the compressive force and moisture causing the wool fibers to mat and lock together into a dense, incredibly durable fabric. It's a better workout than any modern spin class, and the result is the literal fabric of their society. The Pazyryk diet, confirmed by the contents of their pots and their bones, was rich in protein and fat, a classic pastoralist menu. The mainstays were mutton and, on special occasions, horse meat, often boiled in a large bronze cauldron. This was supplemented with cheeses, wild onions and garlic foraged from the hillsides, and grains like barley that they acquired through trade. And for getting around in the winter, they had a clever invention: ice skates. Not the bladed skates you're picturing, but polished horse leg bones, strapped to the bottom of their boots. You can imagine them pushing themselves with a pole across frozen rivers, a practical solution to winter travel in a world of ice. As evening approaches, the men return with the herds, driving them into protective enclosures for the night. The evening meal is a communal affair, a time to gather around the fire, share food, and most importantly, tell stories. In a non-literate culture, your memory is your library. The history of your clan, the great deeds of your ancestors, the complex myths of gods and spirits, all are passed down through the spoken word. A good storyteller is as vital to the community as a good hunter. As you sit by the crackling fire, listening to a tale of a hero who rides a magical stag to the land of the sun, you are struck by how these roles might have intertwined. Historians and archaeologists still debate the rigidity of gender roles in Pazyryk society. While grave goods often suggest a division of labor, the presence of women in warrior graves in other Scythian cultures suggests that these roles may have been more fluid than we assume. Could a woman be a warrior? Could she be a storyteller, a keeper of sacred knowledge? The woman in the ice, with her soft hands and ritual headdress, certainly suggests that a woman's power was not confined to the yurt. As the stars blaze to life in the vast ink-black sky, you realize that the stories being told are the same stories you see depicted everywhere. On their golden plaques, their felt hangings, and most personally on their very skin. The stories told around the crackling fire were ephemeral, lasting only as long as the breath that spoke them. But the Pazyryk had another way of telling stories, a more permanent and profoundly personal medium. You lean closer to the woman in the ice, your gaze drawn to the dark, intricate lines that swirl across her pale skin. The most intimate of all Pazyryk canvases was the human body itself, and she was a masterpiece. Her tattoos are not the crude, thick-lined markings you might imagine from the ancient world. They are elegant, flowing, and rendered with incredible artistic skill. The color is a deep, rich blue-black, still vibrant after 2,500 years. They adorn her arms from her shoulders down to her hands, with more discovered on her legs and lower back. These were not hidden away. They were meant to be seen, a declaration of her identity etched into her very being. The process of creating them would have been a painful and sacred ordeal. Imagine not the steady hum of a modern tattoo machine, but the slow, rhythmic sting of a sharp bone needle or a plant thorn, repeatedly piercing the skin. After each set of punctures, a mixture of soot, likely from larchwood, would have been rubbed into the fresh wounds, sealing the pigment beneath the skin. It was an act of endurance and commitment, a ritual that transformed the body into a living text. Your eyes are drawn to the most magnificent of her tattoos, the one that covers her left shoulder. It is a creature born of myth and nightmare. It has the body of a stag, but its snout is the sharp beak of a griffin. Its powerful antlers are not simple branches of bone, but are themselves alive, sprouting the heads of griffins at their tips. Another small ram's head is depicted emerging from the creature's back. It is a dynamic, swirling image of transformation, a being that exists between the earthly and the divine. On the thumb of her right hand is a leaping ram. Further up her arm, a sleek, powerful predator, perhaps a snow leopard or panther, is contorted into an almost circular shape, its tail looped over its own body. These are the creatures of the Pazyryk cosmos, the key players in the stories you heard whispered around the fire. But what did they mean? It's almost certain they were not mere decoration. In a world full of tangible dangers and unseen spirits, these tattoos were likely a form of permanent, potent magic. They could have been apotropaic emblems, powerful guardians meant to ward off evil forces or sickness. By inking the image of a mythical beast onto your skin, perhaps you took on some of its strength, making it your eternal protector. They could have also served as a visual resume, a map of her life and status. Specific symbols might have denoted her clan, her family, or her spiritual rank. A new tattoo could have marked a key life event. Her first vision, her initiation as a healer or shaman, or her passage into womanhood. The practice of tattooing is, of course, incredibly ancient. Ötzi the Iceman, the famous mummy found in the Italian Alps, lived more than 5,000 years ago and had 61 tattoos. His, however, were simple sets of lines and crosses, and scholars believe they were therapeutic, placed on joints and along his spine to alleviate the pain of arthritis. A kind of prehistoric acupuncture. The Pazyryk tattoos are clearly something else entirely. They are narrative and artistic. And here's a truly bizarre detail. It seems the Pazyryk didn't always stop tattooing you just because you died. Another male mummy discovered in a nearby kurgan had tattoos that were clearly applied post-mortem. Why would you tattoo a corpse? Was it to finish a design interrupted by a sudden death? A final ritual act to prepare the spirit for the next world? It's a wonderfully strange custom, a testament to the importance they placed on these markings. You can almost make a joke about someone putting off their appointment for so long that their friends had to finish it for them. Ultimately, the precise meaning of the animal style remains elusive. Art historians and archaeologists continue to debate the core meaning of the Pazyryk animal style. Were these depictions of real-world animals imbued with spiritual power, representations of mythological beings from their oral stories, or were they abstract symbols of clan identity, much like a European coat of arms? The truth is likely a combination of all three. These images were a dense symbolic language that every Pazyryk would have been able to read, even if we now only catch faint whispers of its meaning. As you look at the woman, you realize that while her clothes, her treasures, and her horses were all things she possessed, her tattoos were something more. They were inseparable from her. They were the story she carried within her skin, her permanent companions on the long, cold journey into darkness. If her tattoos were her spiritual armor, a permanent mantle of power she carried within her skin, then her physical clothing was no less spectacular. Dressed for a journey into the great beyond, she was also prepared for the brutal cold of a Siberian winter. As the archaeologists carefully document and lift each fragile layer, an astonishing outfit, preserved in almost perfect detail, is revealed. You are dressing her in your mind's eye, piece by magnificent piece. The garment closest to her skin is the most surprising. It's a blouse, made not of wool or leather as you might expect, but of wild tussa silk. The fabric is a pale, creamy yellow, and even after 2.5 millennia, you can imagine its softness. This single item of clothing tells a colossal story. The Pazyryk did not produce silk. This fabric began its life thousands of miles away, in China, the closely guarded secret of an entirely different civilization. Its presence here, in a remote mountain tomb in Siberia, is hard evidence of a vast and ancient trade network, a precursor to the famous Silk Road that would one day connect East and West. This was not a garment you could just buy at the local market. It was an object of extreme luxury, a testament to her wealth and far-reaching connections. Over the silk blouse, she wore a long skirt woven from pure wool. It's not a simple, single-colored piece of cloth. It's a complex textile of horizontal stripes in shades of crimson, white, and brown, created using sophisticated weaving techniques. The vibrant red dye, likely derived from the cochineal insect, was another valuable import. The skill required to produce such a fine and intricate fabric was immense. Textile experts still debate the origin of the complex weaving techniques and dyes used in Pazyryk fabrics. Some suggest a local tradition of incredible sophistication, while others argue the patterns show influence from, or were directly imported from, workshops in Persia or other parts of the Near East. Was she wearing the work of a local master weaver, or a treasured import from a distant empire? For warmth, she had leggings, or perhaps more accurately, long stockings made of fine white felt, tailored to fit her legs perfectly. They are decorated at the top with a delicate applique of red felt. Imagine pulling on these thick, soft stockings, a perfect barrier against the biting wind. Her outer garment, a magnificent caftan, has mostly disintegrated, but fragments of it remain, telling a story of warmth and status. It was likely made of squirrel fur, with elegant trimming of a rarer, more luxurious pelt, perhaps otter or sable. Wrapped in fur, wool, and silk, she was an icon of nomadic elegance. And then, there is the headdress. It wasn't on her shaved head, but was placed carefully beside her in the coffin. It is the centerpiece of her entire ensemble, a towering construction of power and myth. Standing nearly 3 feet tall, its base is a felt hat that would have fit snugly over her wig. From this rises an intricate wooden framework, giving the headdress its astonishing height and shape. Sewn onto its surface are 15 small stylized birds exquisitely carved from wood and covered in shimmering gold foil. They seem to be flying up the structure, guiding the way. And at the very front, a larger carving of a deer with branching antlers stands proudly. This was her crown, her ceremonial standard. It was a beacon of her identity, a walking totem pole that connected her to the spirit animals of her world. The birds that traveled between earth and sky, and the noble deer that led souls through the forest of the afterlife. Tucked away with her, you also find a small pouch made of leather or felt. It's her purse. And inside are a few personal items that feel touchingly familiar. There is a small mirror, not of glass but of highly polished metal set in a carved wooden frame, so she could see her reflection. There's a horsehair brush, and there is a small container holding a lump of vivianite, a mineral that grinds into a brilliant blue powder. It was her eyeshadow. It seems some things truly are timeless. Even 2,500 years ago on the vast Siberian steppe, a woman of status carried her cosmetic kit with her. Dressed in finery from across the ancient world, crowned with golden birds, this woman was clearly ready for an important occasion. She was dressed not for an ending but for the beginning of a grand and solemn journey. A Pazyryk, and certainly not a woman of her exalted stature, would ever undertake a journey alone. Dressed in her finest silks and furs, she was still missing her most essential companion, the partner that was central to every aspect of her life, from her daily movements to her spiritual beliefs. You look back to the entrance of her tomb, to the 6 silent guardians who were meant to escort her. To understand the Pazyryk, you must first understand the horse. For the people of the Altai, the horse was not simply a beast of burden or a mode of transportation. It was the engine of their entire world. It was the technology that allowed them to conquer the vast, unforgiving distances of the steppe, to move their homes and families with the seasons, and to become the dominant military force in their region. Without the horse, they would have been tied to one place, their horizons limited. With it, they were masters of a grassy empire, their wealth and power measured in the thunder of hooves. You can almost hear it now, the sound of 100 horses galloping across the plateau, a sound of freedom, power, and life itself. Their connection began in childhood. A Pazyryk child likely learned to ride as soon as they could walk, developing a level of equestrian skill that sedentary peoples could only marvel at. Life was lived in the saddle. The horse was their high-speed vehicle for hunting fleet-footed game, their mobile platform for warfare, and their tireless carrier during migration. The very rhythm of their existence was dictated by the needs of their herds. The Pazyryk were not just horsemen, they were expert breeders. The animals found in their tombs were not small, shaggy ponies. They were tall, powerful, and elegant, the result of generations of selective breeding, creating mounts that were both strong and swift. The domestication of the horse thousands of years earlier on the Eurasian steppe was one of the most transformative events in human history. And the Pazyryk were the proud inheritors of this ancient legacy. This deep practical reliance fostered an equally deep spiritual connection. The horse was seen as a psychopomp, a creature that could travel between worlds. It galloped across the physical landscape, but it could also gallop across the spiritual one, carrying the soul of the deceased from the land of the living to the great beyond. This is why our maiden was not buried with just one horse, but 6. They were her transportation, her guardians and her guides for the journey ahead. Their sacrifice was not an act of waste, but a profound act of faith, equipping their beloved mistress with the finest escort the world had to offer. And the Pazyryk equipped their spiritual escorts with otherworldly flair. Some of the masks created for these sacrificed horses were truly fantastical. You see them covering the horse's face, made of leather and felt but adorned with large curving ibex horns or, even more dramatically, with false antlers, transforming the horse into a mythical stag. It's a stunning piece of ritual art, literally turning a real animal into a mythological one for its journey. A bit of ancient metaphysical customization. This blending of the real and the mythical seems central to their worldview. But were they a people entirely devoted to ritual, or were they a pragmatic military society? Historians still debate whether the Pazyryk and other Scythian groups were a standing army of professional warriors, or a nation in arms, where every able-bodied man, and potentially some women, was a capable fighter when the need arose. The truth is probably that for the Pazyryk there was no firm line between the two. Your role as a herder, a hunter, and a warrior were all extensions of the same skill set, all mastered from the back of a horse. The bond was total. The horse provided their mobility in life and their passage in death. It was a source of food, a symbol of status, a weapon of war, and a sacred being. Every major event, from a seasonal feast to a solemn funeral, was framed by the presence of this one incredible animal. As you contemplate the woman in her tomb and her 6 powerful steeds waiting for her, you understand that her journey to the afterlife was envisioned as one last great migration, one final ride across a starry steppe, with her most trusted companions leading the way. A journey, whether in this world or the next, required more than just a good horse. It required sustenance for the body and rituals for the soul. For the Pazyryk, a feast was not just a meal, it was a powerful social and spiritual event, a way to reinforce community bonds and honor the ancestors. And a funeral was the greatest feast of all. At the center of any gathering, you would find the great bronze cauldron. These were symbols of clan identity and prosperity, passed down through generations. Into this cauldron would go the choicest cuts of meat, usually mutton boiled for hours until tender. But for a funeral of a high-status person, the main course was the meat from sacrificed horses. Portions of this ritual meal, specifically the hindquarters and other fatty cuts, would be placed directly into the tomb with the deceased. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was a literal packed lunch for the afterlife, a final feast to be shared with the spirits who would greet her on the other side. You can almost smell the rich aroma of boiled meat and bone broth mingling with the sharp scent of the mountain air. But the Pazyryk had another, more ethereal form of sustenance, a way to feed the spirit and communicate across the veil between worlds. For centuries, a passage from the Greek historian Herodotus was read with a degree of skepticism. He described a unique Scythian custom for purification after a funeral. He wrote that they would set up a small 3-poled tent, cover it tightly with felt, and place a dish of red-hot stones in the center. Then, they would crawl inside and throw hemp seeds onto the stones. He reported, "A vapor rises so dense that no Greek steam bath could surpass it. The Scythians delighted, shout for joy." For a long time, this was seen as a colorful, perhaps exaggerated story from a settled Greek looking at the strange habits of nomadic barbarians. Then, in the 1940s, archaeologists excavating Pazyryk kurgans found the proof. They unearthed small portable braziers made of stone and bronze, and resting on top of them, leather pouches filled with, you guessed it, cannabis seeds and fruit. They also found the very tripods and felt coverings Herodotus described. It was a stunning, one-to-one confirmation of the ancient text. The archaeology brought the history to life. You can now imagine it perfectly. You're huddled inside that small, dark tent, the air thick with fragrant, psychoactive smoke. It was a hotbox for the soul. This was not recreational drug use as we'd understand it today. It was a deeply ingrained ritual. The smoke was a purifying agent, a medium for prayer, and a vehicle for spiritual travel. For the community, it may have been a way to process grief and feel connected to the departed. But for a spiritual specialist, it could have been much more. Scholars continue to debate whether this ritual cannabis use was a practice for the entire community during mourning rites, or if it was a specialized tool used primarily by shamans and spiritual specialists like our Ice Maiden to facilitate their journeys into the spirit realm. Perhaps for her, inhaling that smoke was like turning the key in an ignition, allowing her consciousness to travel, to seek wisdom from the ancestors, or to guide the souls of the newly dead. And it wasn't just cannabis. Remember that small dish found in the Ice Maiden's coffin? It was filled with coriander seeds. When you burn coriander, it releases a spicy aromatic smoke. It's a form of incense. It's entirely possible they were master mixologists of ritual smoke, blending the psychoactive properties of hemp with the aromatic qualities of other herbs and spices to create a specific spiritual atmosphere. This was ancient aromatherapy with a serious kick. Feasting on meat, they nourished the body for its journey. Inhaling the sacred smoke, they freed the spirit to travel ahead. They were a people who saw the physical and spiritual worlds not as separate realms, but as interwoven landscapes, and they had all the provisions they needed to navigate both. The Pazyryk were clearly well equipped to travel the spiritual step, with their ritual feasts and sacred smoke, but the objects buried with them prove they were equally well connected to the great empires of the physical world. The silk blouse in the Ice Maiden's tomb was a whisper from distant China, but a much louder, more insistent voice echoes through their possessions. A voice from the south, from the single greatest superpower of their age, the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Centered in modern-day Iran, the Achaemenid Empire was the behemoth of the 5th century BCE. Founded by Cyrus the Great, it stretched from the shores of Greece to the plains of India, a multicultural powerhouse of immense wealth and influence. To the courtiers in the grand Persian capitals of Persepolis or Susa, the Altai Mountains would have seemed like the distant frozen edge of the known world. And yet, the fingerprints of their sophisticated culture are found all over the Pazyryk tombs, proving that these nomads were far from isolated. The most stunning piece of evidence was found frozen in another Pazyryk kurgan. You are in a laboratory, watching as conservators unroll a textile that has been frozen for 2,400 years. It is the Pazyryk carpet, the oldest known pile carpet in existence. The craftsmanship is breathtaking, but it's the design that tells the story. The central field contains a grid of stylized floral patterns. It is the borders, however, that act like a passport. One border depicts a procession of 24 fallow deer. The next, even more tellingly, shows a procession of 28 men on horseback. The style of the riders, their posture, their clothing, the knotted tails of their horses is unmistakably Persian. It is a scene lifted directly from the stone relief carvings that adorn the grand staircases of Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the Achaemenid Empire. And there's more. In another tomb, a massive felt wall hanging, over 30 square meters in size, depicts a scene straight out of a Persian courtly legend. A rider with a Scythian-style bow and quiver approaches a seated, bearded figure who looks for all the world like a Persian nobleman or king. The figure is enthroned, wears a Persian-style robe, and holds a flowering branch, a classic tree of life motif. Little decorative touches, like a tiny carved wooden figurine of a lion griffin, a creature straight out of Persian mythology, are found attached to horse bridles. It's like finding a miniature Hollywood action figure in a remote tribal village, a small, curious emblem of a massive cultural exchange. So how did these luxurious imperial objects end up in the tombs of Siberian nomads? It could have been through trade. The Pazyryk controlled the high mountain passes and may have acted as intermediaries, trading precious local goods like gold dust, fine furs, and their famously robust horses for the sophisticated products of the South. Or the connection could have been diplomatic. Archaeologists and historians still debate the exact nature of these southern connections. Were the Pazyryk sophisticated trading partners operating on a distant frontier of the Persian Empire, or were they considered a remote and dangerous tribe to be placated with lavish gifts? These magnificent textiles might have been diplomatic presents from a Persian governor, meant to secure the loyalty or neutrality of a powerful nomadic chieftain. There is also a third possibility: war. Scythian horsemen were renowned throughout the ancient world for their skill as archers, and were often hired as mercenaries by the great empires. It is entirely possible that Pazyryk warriors served in Persian armies, returning home with their pay not in coin, but in looted treasures or high-status gifts from their employers. Whatever the mechanism, these objects shatter the myth of the isolated barbarian. The Pazyryk were operating on a world stage. They were aware of the great empires to their south, and those empires were certainly aware of them. They were not just passive consumers of foreign luxuries. They were a formidable power in their own right, with a military reputation that commanded respect and sometimes fear across the ancient world. That respect from the great southern empires, the respect that brought gifts of Persian carpets and Chinese silks into the remote Altai, wasn't won through polite trade negotiations alone. It was earned at the point of an arrow from the back of a galloping horse. To face the Pazyryk in battle was to face a whirlwind of death, a style of warfare so mobile, so alien to the foot-bound armies of the settled world, that it bordered on a force of nature. Imagine you are a soldier in an infantry phalanx, marching in tight formation. Suddenly on the horizon a dust cloud appears. It resolves into hundreds of riders who approach at a full gallop. They don't charge your lines. Instead, they flow around your flanks like water, staying just outside the range of your spears and swords. Then comes a sound like a sudden, violent rainstorm, the thrum of 1,000 bowstrings being released at once. The sky darkens with arrows. Before you can even mount a response, they are gone, melting back into the steppe, only to reappear on your other side to unleash another volley. This was the terrifying genius of Scythian warfare, a relentless, swarming, hit-and-run tactic that demoralized and decimated armies before they ever had a chance to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Their primary weapon, the engine of this mobile destruction, was the composite bow. This was the assault rifle of the ancient world. Not carved from a single piece of wood, it was a sophisticated lamination of materials. A wooden core, a layer of animal sinew on the back, the side facing away from the archer, and a layer of animal horn on the belly, the side facing the archer. Sinew resists stretching and horn resists compression. When bent, this combination stored a phenomenal amount of energy, far more than a simple wooden bow of the same size. The result was a compact, incredibly powerful weapon with a long range, perfectly suited for use on horseback. Military historians still debate the exact composition and range of the glues used in Scythian composite bows, as the precise recipe was a closely guarded secret that gave them a significant technological advantage over their enemies. Whatever the formula, it worked. Their arrows were just as specialized, fitted with barbed bronze heads that were viciously effective against unarmored targets. For close quarters work, when the fighting became intimate, they carried the iconic akinakis, a short double-edged sword or dagger, and the sagaris, a heavy pointed battle axe capable of piercing helmets and armor. These weapons were carried in a uniquely Scythian piece of kit called a goritos. This was a combination bow case and quiver, worn at the hip, that kept both the bow and about 50 arrows protected and ready for immediate action. Many surviving examples are covered in elaborate gold sheets depicting scenes from their mythology, making them both a deadly weapon system and a magnificent piece of art. This was a society where martial skill was woven into the fabric of daily life. A boy hunting for marmots with his bow was practicing the same skills he would one day use in battle. This constant, low-level training created a population of expert horsemen and archers, and it may not have been limited to the men. While our Ice Maiden was almost certainly a spiritual leader, not a warrior, archaeologists have found other Scythian graves, particularly of the related Sarmatian tribes, that contain the bodies of women buried with a full complement of weapons. These warrior women are the likely historical basis for the Greek myths of the Amazons. The effectiveness of this style of warfare is legendary. The Parthian Empire, which inherited these tactics, famously used mounted archers to annihilate a vastly larger Roman army at the Battle of Carrhae, a defeat that haunted Rome for centuries. But for the Pazyryk, a battle was likely more than just a tactical exercise. It was a spiritual one, where the mythical beasts tattooed on their skin gave them strength, and their fate was guided by the unseen forces of their rugged, sacred homeland. That spiritual world of the Pazyryk, filled with powerful beasts and ancestor spirits, wasn't just a vague concept. It was a territory to be navigated, a landscape as real and often as dangerous as the physical steppes. And for that, the Pazyryk needed expert guides. individuals who could walk the path between the seen and the unseen. They needed shamans, healers, and otherworldly guides. As you assemble all the clues laid out before you, a powerful image of the woman in the ice begins to form. She was one of these guides. Shamanism, in its essence, is one of the oldest forms of human spirituality, a practice with roots stretching back into the Stone Age. It is not a religion of temples and priests, but one of direct personal experience. A shaman is a man or a woman who, through ecstatic trance, illness, or intense training, is believed to gain the ability to communicate directly with the spirit world. They are the healers who diagnose the spiritual root of a sickness. They are the diviners who can see the future in the shimmer of a polished mirror. They are the psychopomps who, like the horses they revere, can guide the souls of the dead safely to the afterlife. They are the community's living bridge to the cosmos. And the evidence that our maiden held such a role is overwhelming. You look again at the objects buried with her, but now you see them through a different lens. Her towering headdress is not a political crown, but a ritual antenna, adorned with the birds that could carry messages to the sky world and the deer that could guide her through the dark forests of the underworld. Her tattoos are not mere decoration, but a permanent map of her spiritual power. The mythical beasts her loyal spirit allies, forever bound to her skin. Her shaved head is the mark of a consecrated individual, set apart from the mundane world. Her soft hands are those of a person whose work was not with wool and leather, but with spirits and visions. The cannabis and coriander found in Pazyryk tombs, and the coriander specifically with her, are no longer just party favors or dinner ingredients. They are the tools of her trade. The cannabis-filled brazier was a psychotropic engine, a technology for altering consciousness and opening the doors of perception. The fragrant coriander smoke was incense, used to purify the ritual space and invite the presence of helpful spirits. Her small pouch was not a cosmetic bag, it was a shaman's kit. The polished mirror was not just for checking her reflection, but for scrying, for gazing into its depths to find answers. The blue mineral powder wasn't just eyeshadow. It was sacred paint used to anoint herself or others during rituals. And while our maiden's tomb did not contain one, the grave of a man from a nearby kurgan, also believed to be a shaman, held the quintessential tool of the trade, a drum. For Siberian shamans, the drum is the sacred vehicle. Its steady, hypnotic beat is the galloping of their spirit horse, carrying their soul out of their body and into other realities. The presence of such an object within the Pazyryk culture solidifies the shamanic interpretation of their worldview. This was their way. And so, while the evidence for her role as a spiritual specialist is compelling, scholars remain divided on her exact title. Was she a shaman in the classic Siberian sense, an oracle who spoke for the gods, or a healer who used knowledge of herbs and spirits to cure the sick? The Pazyryk language is lost, and with it, the specific word they would have used for her. But the role is clear. She was a liminal figure, a person who lived at the edge of the community, with one foot in the world of the yurts and herds, and the other in the swirling mythic world of the spirits. She was likely both revered and feared, a woman of great power and mystery. The story of her life was intertwined with the fantastical creatures of her belief system, the same creatures that adorn every aspect of Pazyryk existence, a visual language of the sacred. This spirit world our shamanic maiden navigated was not an abstract concept. It had a face, a form, and a visual grammar. To understand her beliefs is to learn to see the world as she did, and that means learning to read the vibrant, swirling language of her people's art, the Scythian animal style. This was not simply decoration. This was theology, history, and poetry rendered in gold, felt, and flesh. When you first look at Pazyryk art, your eye is drawn to its incredible energy. Nothing is static. Animals are coiled in tense circles, captured mid-leap or locked in a violent struggle for survival. They are dynamic beings, their muscles taut, their bodies contorted to fit the shape of the object they adorn. A round shield boss, a rectangular saddle blanket, a curved cheek piece. This art is a lexicon of powerful creatures, some real, some born of pure myth. you start to recognize the main characters in their epic saga. First, there is the griffin. You see it everywhere. On the maiden's tattoos, on her horse's masks, on golden plaques. It is a composite beast, the terrifying fusion of the two most powerful predators the Pazyryk knew. It has the muscular body of a lion, king of the earth, and the head and wings of a mighty eagle, king of the sky. In the ancient world, the griffin was a universal symbol of guardianship, often said to protect vast treasures of gold. For the Pazyryk, placing a griffin on a horse's bridle was like adding a supernatural security system. It was a fierce protector, a being that commanded dominion over both the earthly and celestial realms. Then there is the stag, or its mountain cousin, the ibex. You see it on the maiden's headdress, its antlers reaching for the sky. The Pazyryk depicted them with impossibly elaborate branching antlers, which often transform at their tips into the heads of birds. The stag was a profoundly important creature. Its antlers, resembling the rays of the sun, made it a solar animal, a symbol of light and life, and because it shed and regrew its antlers each year, it was also a powerful symbol of rebirth, regeneration, and the eternal cycle of life and death. It was the perfect creature to act as a psychopomp, a gentle guide to lead the soul of the deceased from one life into the next. One of the most common themes you see is the combat scene. A griffin savages a horse, a coiled snow leopard sinks its teeth into the neck of an ibex. This is more than just a brutal depiction of nature. It is a visual representation of a fundamental cosmic principle, the violent, unending struggle between opposing forces. It could be order versus chaos, light versus dark, or simply the brutal reality of the food chain that underpinned their entire existence. And sometimes, you see things that are just wonderfully strange, giving you a glimpse into a mythology far weirder than you could imagine. One famous tattoo on a male chieftain shows a giant, fantastical fish, complete with legs and a cat-like face, being attacked by a monster. It's a scene so surreal it could be from a Guillermo del Toro movie, a tantalizing fragment of a lost story. The consistency of these motifs, the griffin, the stag, the combat scenes across thousands of miles of the Eurasian steppe, is a key historical fact. It shows that all the Scythian tribes, from the Black Sea to the Altai Mountains, shared a common artistic and mythological vocabulary. They were culturally connected. But how literally should we read this language? Scholars have long debated whether the animal style should be read as a direct text with each animal representing a specific god or story, or if it was a more flexible symbolic system, where the meaning of a creature could change depending on its context and the other animals it was paired with. Was the griffin always a guardian? Or could it sometimes represent a destructive force? We lack the dictionary to know for sure. But for the Pazyryk, this visual language was everything. It was their scripture, their encyclopedia, and their history, all encoded in the silent, swirling forms of the beasts that populated their world. That rich visual language of the animal style was so critical to the Pazyryk for one simple, profound reason. Like all Scythian peoples, they were a non-literate society. They left behind no books, no stone inscriptions, no letters written on parchment. Their language, the sound and shape of their words, vanished into the thin mountain air the moment the last speaker fell silent. In our modern world, we often equate literacy with intelligence and sophistication. But this is a profound misunderstanding. To be non-literate is not to be ignorant. It simply means that your culture, as most precious commodity, its knowledge, is stored and transmitted in a different way. In the world of the Pazyryk, the primary hard drive was the human mind. Imagine having to hold your entire people's history in your head. The full genealogy of your clan stretching back hundreds of years, the epic stories of your greatest heroes, the precise migration routes your ancestors established, the sacred myths that explain the creation of the world. In a society without writing, memory is a superpower, a muscle that is trained and developed from childhood to an astonishing degree. Knowledge was not a static object on a page. It was a living, breathing thing, passed directly from one mind to another. The main vehicle for this transmission was the oral tradition. You sit by the fire at night, as we imagined earlier, and you listen. You listen to the clan elder, the storyteller, the bard. Anthropologists and historians still debate whether the great storytellers in Scythian society were a specialized professional class, akin to Celtic bards, or if this was a role that any respected elder, male or female, could fulfill. Whoever they were, their words were magic. They wove together history, poetry, and myth into epic tales that were both entertainment and education. This was how you learned who you were, where you came from, and what your place was in the cosmos. Annual rituals and festivals would have reinforced these lessons. The community coming together to reenact the great stories, the repetitions cementing them in the collective memory. Their art was a vital part of this system. The animal style wasn't writing, but it was a powerful set of mnemonic cues. A young warrior looking at the griffin on his horse as bridle wouldn't just see a cool design. He would be reminded of the great story of the first Pazyryk hero who was protected by a griffin spirit. The images anchored the oral tales, giving them a physical presence in the world. They even had a rudimentary form of data storage. Archaeologists have found small carved plaques of bone or antler, marked with intricate patterns of dots and circles. Were these lunar calendars? Tally sticks for counting livestock? We don't know, but they show a mind reaching for a way to record information, a kind of proto-writing. Living without writing is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can foster an incredible sense of community and a dynamic, flexible culture. Stories can be adapted and updated with each telling. On the other hand, it is incredibly fragile. If the chain of oral transmission is broken, the knowledge is lost forever. And that is the great tragedy of the Pazyryk. The permafrost gave us their bodies, their clothes, their treasures, the physical hardware of their lives. But the software, their language, their poems, their histories as told in their own words, is gone. We are left to read the silent language of their art, and the even more intimate stories told by their physical remains, by the marks that life on the steppe left upon their bones. And those physical remains preserved by the ice tell a story that no myth or epic poem ever could. It is a story of incredible resilience in the face of constant hardship, a story written in the language of bone, sinew, and scar tissue. This is the world of paleopathology, the science of reading the history of disease, injury, and health from ancient bodies. It gives us an intimate, unvarnished look at the physical realities of Pazyryk life. From their skeletons, we can see that these were, by and large, tough and robust people. Their bones show strong muscle attachments, the signature of a physically demanding life. Healed fractures on arms, legs, and collarbones are common, the expected result of a life spent on horseback where a bad fall was a constant risk. You see the wear and tear of their lifestyle etched into their very joints. Degenerative arthritis, especially in the lower back and knees, was rampant, the inevitable consequence of spending thousands of hours in the saddle. Their teeth tell a similar story. They were often worn down flat, not from decay but from a gritty diet where wind-blown sand inevitably found its way into the food, and from the common practice of using their teeth as a third hand to grip and soften leather. But life on the steppe also held more insidious dangers. In the close, smoky confines of a winter yurt, infectious diseases like tuberculosis could spread easily. And as modern science has turned its most advanced tools onto the Pazyryk mummies, we've learned that they suffered from the same devastating illnesses that haunt us today. It is a mainstream historical fact that cancer is not a modern disease. Evidence of it has been found in Egyptian mummies and even in the bones of our earliest ancestors. And our Ice Maiden, this powerful young shaman, was one of its victims. When Russian scientists took her perfectly preserved body and examined it with modern MRI scanners, they found the shadows of her final battle. The images revealed a primary tumor in her right breast. It was advanced breast cancer. The scans showed it had already metastasized, spreading to the lymph nodes in her armpit and most cruelly to her spine. You can now begin to understand the reality of her final months or years. She would have been in chronic, debilitating pain. She would have suffered from fevers, weakness, and a profound exhaustion that no amount of rest could cure. This knowledge transforms our image of her. She was not just an enigmatic spiritual power, she was a young woman, only 25, grappling with a terrifying and painful terminal illness. And what of the cannabis? The tool of her shamanic trade now takes on a deeply poignant double meaning. It was almost certainly her medicine. In a world without morphine, the psychoactive and pain-relieving properties of inhaled cannabis would have been her primary source of palliative care, a way to find some measure of peace from the relentless pain that racked her body. She was a healer, using her own sacred medicine to treat her own suffering. Her final moments were likely tragic. The current theory, based on injuries found on her body, is that she fell, probably from a horse. For a healthy Pazyryk, this might have been a survivable event, but in her weakened, cancer-ravaged state, it was a fatal blow. Paleopathologists continue to debate the final sequence of events. Did the fall from the horse cause her death directly, or did it simply hasten the inevitable end from a body already ravaged by advanced cancer? Whatever the precise cause, her death marked the end of a life lived with both incredible spiritual power and immense physical suffering. And yet, the splendor of her burial tells you something crucial. Her illness did not diminish her. In the eyes of her people, she remained a figure of such importance that they moved mountains, both literally and figuratively, to give her a send-off worthy of a queen. The immense respect shown to the Ice Maiden, even in her sickness, tells us that Pazyryk society was anything but a simple, egalitarian group of herders. It was a complex, stratified world, a social pyramid with distinct layers of power, prestige, and privilege. While they left us no organizational charts, the tombs themselves provide a clear map of their intricate social weave. At the very pinnacle of this pyramid were the chieftains and their noble families. These were the powerful leaders of the clans, their authority stemming from their military prowess, the vast size of their animal herds, and their control over the trade that brought in luxurious foreign goods. They were the ones who commanded the labor needed to build the most enormous kurgans, tombs filled with dozens of sacrificed horses, and breathtaking treasures of gold and silk. Their burials were grand public spectacles, designed to cement their family's power and legacy for generations. It was a classic system of clan-based aristocracy, common among the nomadic confederations of the Iron Age. Just below this ruling elite, you find a respected tier of specialists, the highly skilled individuals whose knowledge was essential to the functioning and identity of the Pazyryk world. This is where our Ice Maiden fits. She was a spiritual specialist, a shaman whose power gave her a unique and revered status that existed alongside, and perhaps sometimes even rivaled, that of the chieftains. Alongside her were the master artisans, the person who carved the mythical beasts for a horse's bridle, the weaver who created the complex patterns on a woolen skirt, the metallurgist who forged the sharpest Akhenaten's dagger. These were not ordinary herders. They were masters of their craft, and their skills would have been in high demand. And of course, there were the elite warriors, the chieftain's personal retinue, who would have enjoyed high status and a greater share of the spoils of war. The broad base of the pyramid was made up of the common herders, the backbone of the entire society. These were the families who owned smaller herds, whose lives were a constant cycle of hard work, milking, shearing, moving camp, and protecting their animals from predators and raiders. Their lives were undoubtedly tough, but they were the engine of the Pazyryk economy. Their burials reflect their status, simple, flat graves in the earth with few, if any, grave goods to accompany them on their journey. Archaeologists still debate the economic relationship between the elites and the commoners. Was it a feudal system where chieftains owned all the herds and commoners were essentially serfs? Or was it a more communal system where families owned their own animals, but paid tribute to a leader in exchange for protection? The answer is likely somewhere in between. And at the very bottom, a class of people whose lives were not their own. Servants and enslaved individuals, likely captives taken in raids on neighboring tribes. The Greek writers tell us of Scythians blinding their slaves, and the sacrificed retainers found in the grandest royal tombs suggest that some people were considered property, their lives forfeit upon the death of their master. Status in this world was serious business, and sometimes it was even physically branded onto you. Some Pazyryk elites practiced artificial cranial deformation, binding the heads of their infants to create a distinctive elongated skull shape. This was a permanent, painful, and highly visible marker of aristocratic birth, separating them from the common folk for their entire lives. This complex social machine, with its powerful elites and skilled specialists, created a constant demand for the things that signified status: exotic materials, fine craftsmanship, and powerful symbols. It was this demand that fueled the great trade routes that crisscrossed the ancient world, connecting their remote mountain pastures to the heart of distant empires. That powerful demand for the rare, the beautiful, and the exotic created a network of arteries that pulsed with life, connecting the Pazyryk to the wider world. These weren't paved highways or maritime shipping lanes. These were trade routes carved by hoofbeats, ancient pathways of exchange that followed the seasons and the guidance of the stars. Far from being an isolated outpost, the Altai Mountains were a crucial crossroads of the ancient world, a hub where the great cultural spheres of China, Persia, India, and the Siberian forests all converged. Trade, of course, is a two-way street. To acquire the treasures of the south, the Pazyryk had to have something valuable to offer in return, and their rugged homeland was rich in resources. Their number one export was almost certainly the horse itself. The strong, hardy, and well-bred horses of the Altai were a prized commodity, eagerly sought by the armies of settled empires who needed reliable cavalry mounts. A Pazyryk chieftain might trade a string of his finest horses for a bolt of Chinese silk or a Persian carpet. Next came the soft gold of the mountains. Furs, the dense, luxurious pelts of sable, otter, and ermine, trapped in the northern forests, were worth a fortune in the warmer climates of Persia and beyond, where they became the trim on the robes of kings. The Pazyryk also likely traded gold dust, panned from the mountain streams, and musk, a pungent substance from the musk deer that was a key ingredient in the perfumes and medicines of the ancient world. In return for these raw materials, a river of finished luxury goods flowed north. You've already seen the evidence: the silk blouse from China, the woolen textiles from Persia, the glass beads from Mesopotamia. But other, smaller items tell an even more dramatic story of distance. In some Pazyryk and other Scythian tombs, archaeologists have found small clusters of cowrie shells. These little white shells, used as currency and decoration across the ancient world, come from one place: the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. Imagine the journey of a single shell, plucked from a beach, traded to a merchant in India, passed along a route through Afghanistan into the Persian sphere, and then bartered from tribe to tribe, moving ever northward until it ended its journey sewn onto a leather pouch in a frozen Siberian tomb, thousands of miles from its home. This was the Great Steppe Route, the older, wilder brother of the more famous Silk Road. For centuries, it was the primary channel for goods, ideas, and technologies moving across the Eurasian landmass. It is unlikely that a single Pazyryk trader made the entire journey from the Altai to the Indian Ocean. Instead, it was a down-the-line system. The Pazyryk would trade with their neighbors, who would trade with the next tribe in the chain, and so on. At each step, the goods would increase in value, passing through dozens of hands before reaching their final destination. Historians and economists still debate how formalized this trade was. Was it a free market of individual traders and nomads bartering goods? Or was it a highly controlled system, managed exclusively by the tribal chieftains to maintain their power and monopoly on luxury items? Regardless of the precise mechanics, the Pazyryk, by virtue of their strategic location controlling key mountain passes, were perfectly positioned to profit from this flow. They were the gatekeepers, the middlemen, the masters of this section of the ancient world's information superhighway. And so, the treasures of the world found their way into the hands of the Pazyryk elite, becoming the markers of their status in life. But ultimately, all these long-traveled objects, the silk, the shells, the carpets, had one final destination. Their journey across the physical world was over. Now, they were being gathered together, prepared for one last sacred journey into the great unknown. But a journey needs more than just provisions. It needs a traveler. And for our Ice Maiden, the woman you have come to know, the time to depart was drawing near. You return now to the high Altai pasture, to the camp of her people. The air is different. The usual rhythm of nomadic life is muted, replaced by a heavy, watchful silence. The cancer that had been consuming her from within has done its final work. Her great spirit, which had roamed the otherworldly plains, is preparing for its final release from a body racked with pain. In her last days, she is no longer the active healer, but the revered patient cared for by her clan. The end, when it comes, is a moment of profound significance. It is not just the loss of a loved one, but the extinguishing of a spiritual flame, a tear in the fabric that connects the community to the world of the ancestors. A great wail rises from the camp, a sound of pure, untamed grief that echoes off the Golden Mountains. This is the beginning of a long and highly structured period of mourning. The Greek historian Herodotus tells us that when a Scythian king died, his people would engage in dramatic acts of grief. They would shave their hair, cut their skin, and parade the body around the lands he once ruled for 40 days. While our maiden was not a king, the same depth of ritual and sorrow now unfolds. Her body is taken from the family yurt to a smaller sacred tent set apart from the others. Here, the most intimate and crucial preparations for her journey begin. This is the process of mummification, a sacred surgery designed to make the body whole and incorruptible for its long wait and its even longer journey. Archaeologists and ritual specialists still debate who would have performed this sacred task. Were they a class of specialized embalmers, akin to those in ancient Egypt, or was this final service performed by close female relatives or fellow shamans? Whoever they were, their hands moved with reverence and skill. You watch from a distance as they work. The brain, considered of little importance, is removed. A careful incision is made along her side, and the internal organs are gently taken out to be cleaned, treated, and likely buried separately. The empty body cavity is then cleansed with fragrant herbs like thyme and other mountain plants, purifying it. Then begins the sacred packing. It is stuffed with a mixture of dry grasses, wool, and horsehair, meticulously arranged to preserve her human shape, to keep the vessel of her soul from collapsing. And mixed in with these materials, archaeologists have found another key ingredient: cannabis stalks and leaves. The sacred plant that helped her travel in spirit is now used to preserve her in body, its power quite literally infused into her physical form for the journey to the afterlife. Once the packing is complete, the long incision is stitched closed with a fine thread of horsehair or sinew. Her skin is rubbed with oils and resin to help preserve it. She is now prepared, a permanent, peaceful effigy of the woman she was. This process was not just for our benefit, a lucky accident for future science. It served a vital, practical purpose. The construction of her final resting place would be a monumental undertaking, requiring weeks of labor. This careful preservation ensured that her body would remain intact, lying in state, as her people worked to build her a home fit for eternity. Her body is now ready. The first stage of her final journey is complete. While her prepared body rests in the sacred tent, her people begin the great work. A funeral for a person of her stature is not a quiet, private affair. It is a massive public works project, an act of communal devotion that will require the strength and skill of the entire clan. Building a house for eternity is no small task. The first step is to break the skin of the earth. You join the work party on the high plateau, at a site chosen for its spiritual significance. Using simple tools, shovels tipped with bronze, picks made from sharpened antlers, and woven baskets to carry away the soil, the digging begins. The work is slow and backbreaking. You dig for days, your muscles aching, carving a massive rectangular pit out of the rocky soil, a precise hole that will be the foundation of her eternal home. When it's finished, it's a chasm, some 15 feet deep and nearly as wide, a wound in the earth waiting to be filled. Next comes the timber. The high plateaus are above the tree line, so the massive larch logs needed for the burial chamber must be harvested from the forested valleys, miles away and thousands of feet below. You can imagine the scene. Teams of men with bronze axes felling ancient trees, the sharp crack of the wood echoing through the valley, then the immense struggle of hauling these colossal logs, each weighing a ton or more, up the steep mountainsides, using horse-drawn sledges, levers, and sheer muscle power. It is a feat of raw, brute force engineering. Down in the pit, the master craftsmen begin their work. They are expert woodworkers and they assemble the burial chamber with the precision of fine cabinet makers. It is a house within a house, a sturdy, double-walled log structure built to withstand the weight of the earth for millennia. The corners are joined with perfectly cut saddle notches, a technique still used in log cabin construction today. The floor is paved with heavy timbers, and a thick log roof is placed on top, leaving only one entrance. This tradition of building burial mounds or kurgans is ancient and widespread. In fact, the kurgan hypothesis suggests that this very burial practice is linked to the expansion of the first Indo-European speakers from the steppe thousands of years earlier. The Pazyryk were heirs to a very long and powerful tradition. Once the wooden structure is complete, the interior is prepared. The walls are draped with thick sheets of black felt, creating a dark, silent womb-like space. The floor is lined with fragrant birch bark, its natural oils acting as a water repellent. Every detail is considered. The chamber is always built with a specific alignment, so that when the maiden is finally laid to rest, her head will be pointing east, towards the rising sun, the direction of rebirth. Archaeologists and social historians still debate the organization of this labor force. Was the work performed by clan members as a social obligation, or were there specialized teams of tomb builders, or was the heaviest labor perhaps done by enslaved captives? Whatever the system, the result is a masterpiece of funerary architecture. Finally, after weeks of relentless labor, it is finished. The tomb stands waiting at the bottom of the deep pit, a silent, dark, and perfectly prepared chamber. It is a house built not for the living, but for the dead. It is ready to receive its honored occupant and all the treasures she will need for the journey that lies ahead. An empty house is not a home, not even a home for eternity. Before the maiden is brought to her final resting place, her people must furnish it with everything she will need for a comfortable and high-status existence in the great beyond. You stand with the clan as a solemn procession begins, moving from the camp to the edge of the open pit. People carry objects both practical and precious, the final gifts for their beloved guide. The first things to be placed inside the dark, felt-lined chamber are the furnishings. You watch as several low, intricately carved wooden tables are passed down. They are beautiful pieces of nomadic furniture, their legs designed to be removed for easy transport, a detail that speaks to their life on the move. Archaeologists still debate whether these furnishings were replicas made specifically for the tomb, or if they were the deceased's actual, well-used personal furniture, taken out of their yurt to accompany them. Either way, they transform the log box into a room. Next, thick felt rugs, patterned with the familiar animal-style motifs, are unrolled on the floor. A large, colorful felt hanging might be placed against a wall. The cold, dark tomb is being made warm and familiar. Then come the provisions. A young man carefully carries the heavy haunches of a horse and a fat-tailed sheep, placing the meat in a corner of the chamber, her first meal in the afterlife. Another person brings a decorated leather flask, perhaps once filled with fortifying kumis, and places it beside a set of carved wooden bowls and a cup. This practice of including grave goods is one of the oldest and most universal of all human rituals, a testament to a deep-seated, ancient belief in an afterlife that mirrors our own world, a place where you will still feel hunger, thirst, and the need for comfort. Next are her personal belongings. The small pouch containing her polished bronze mirror, her cosmetic pigment, and other small treasures is placed carefully beside the spot where she will lie. A small stone tray, the one that held the coriander seeds for her rituals, is set upon one of the low tables. An ornamental whip, its handle carved and wrapped in gold foil, is laid nearby, a symbol of her mastery over the horses that were so central to her world. Every object is a piece of her story, a tool she might need, a comfort she might desire. It is a curated collection, a starter pack for eternity, chosen with immense love and care. You watch as the last of the gifts are arranged. The chamber is no longer an empty wooden box. It is now a fully appointed subterranean suite, a slice of a Pazyryk noble's life frozen in time. The felt rugs soften the floor, the tables are ready to receive guests from the spirit world, and the scent of larchwood and coriander hangs in the still, cold air. The house is ready. It waits now for its mistress and for the magnificent guardians who will escort her there. The house is ready. The gifts are in place. Now come the guardians, the magnificent living engines that will power her journey through the afterlife. You hear them before you see them, the snort of breath in the cold air, the soft jingle of bronze, the respectful murmur of the crowd. Then they appear, led by their grooms in a solemn procession. 6 of the finest horses from the clan's herds, their coats gleaming, their muscles taut. They are in the prime of their life, a testament to the wealth and devotion of her people. This is not a sad, mournful parade. It is a procession of honor. The horses are dressed not for pasture or for war, but for a divine mission. Their heads are covered in elaborate masks of leather and felt, some adorned with curving ibex horns, others with gilded wooden antlers that transform these mortal creatures into mythical stags. Their bridles and cheek pieces are a riot of animal-style art, with golden griffins and swirling beasts seeming to writhe on the leather straps. Richly colored saddle blankets, masterpieces of felt applique, are draped over their backs. Some even bear the ultimate mark of sacredness. On their flanks, you can see dark, tattooed symbols, the same powerful images that adorned the skin of the shamans themselves. They are no longer just horses. They have been transformed into spirit beings, ready to gallop across the bridge between worlds. Historians and archaeologists still debate the exact criteria for selecting these horses. Were they the deceased's personal, favorite mounts from life, or were they the finest specimens chosen from the entire clan's herd as a collective offering? Whatever the case, their fate is a sacred one. They are led one by one to the edge of the pit. The air grows still. From our modern perspective, what happens next is difficult to comprehend. But for the Pazyryk, it was an act of profound necessity and faith. The horse's spirit had to be released from its physical form to join its mistress. The ritual is swift, practiced, and solemn. A single, powerful blow to the forehead from a ceremonial poleaxe, and the great heart is stilled. The silence that follows is absolute, a moment of deep reverence for the sacrifice. This practice of large-scale horse sacrifice was a hallmark of elite Scythian burials across the entire steppe, a display of wealth and a crucial provisioning for the afterlife. The spirit of each horse is now free, sent ahead to wait for its rider. Their bodies are then carefully lowered into the grave shaft, into the space outside the wooden burial chamber. They are not tossed in haphazardly. They are laid out with care, arranged in neat pairs, their legs tucked beneath them as if in rest, their magnificent harnesses and masks still perfectly in place. There they lie, an eternal honor guard at the door to their mistress's home. They are the silent, powerful sentinels of the underworld, the guardians of her tomb and the steeds for her soul. Their sacrifice is the clan's ultimate gift, a breathtaking display of love and faith. The tomb is now fully furnished, fully provisioned, and powerfully guarded. All is in readiness. All that remains is for the maiden herself to join them. The offerings have been made. The guardians are in place. Now, in the final act of this long, solemn ballet of death, the maiden herself is brought to her home. Her mummified body, dressed in its finest afterlife attire, is carried in a reverent procession to the edge of the pit. She is carefully lowered down into the darkness and placed gently inside the massive, hollowed-out large sarcophagus. Her towering headdress is arranged beside her head, her mirror and other personal items placed within reach. The heavy log lid is set in place and secured. The inner chamber is sealed. She is now alone in the silent, fragrant dark. Above, the work of sealing the tomb begins. The deep pit is filled with the earth and stones that were so laboriously removed weeks before. You can hear the thud of soil and the clatter of rocks as the grave is filled layer by layer until the ground is level once more. But they don't stop there. They continue to pile thousands of stones and boulders on top, creating the low, rounded hill, the kurgan, that will be her final eternal monument. As the last stone is laid, the Pazyryk's work is done. They have honored their guide, built her a magnificent house, and provided for her journey. They turn back to their camp, leaving her to the silence, the darkness, and the gods. And now, a force far more powerful and patient than any human effort takes over. Nature begins its own slow, miraculous work. The tomb the Pazyryk built was not waterproof. The log roof had small gaps, and the loose pile of stones above it was porous. This was its great flaw, and its greatest secret. That autumn, the rains come. You are the rain, seeping down through the new mound of earth and stone, trickling through the cracks in the log roof of the burial chamber. You fill the chamber, submerging the sarcophagus, covering the bodies of the 6 magnificent horses. You are the water, and you have invaded the sacred space. Then, winter arrives. It comes with a terrifying ferocity, a force that can split stone and freeze the very marrow in your bones. You are the cold, sinking through the jumbled stones of the kurgan, which act as a perfect cold trap. You reach the water that has flooded the tomb. The temperature plummets below freezing, and the water begins to turn to ice. Crucially, it is a slow, methodical freeze. Not a violent flash freeze that would shatter delicate tissues, but a creeping cold that forms smaller, less damaging ice crystals. The water inside the sarcophagus freezes. The water around the horses freezes. The entire burial chamber, with its occupant, her treasures, and her guardians, becomes a single, solid block of ice. The short Altai summer is not long or warm enough to melt this subterranean glacier. The mound of stones acts as a giant parasol, an insulating layer that protects the ice from the sun. The next winter, the ice grows even colder, even deeper. Over the years, it merges with the surrounding permafrost, the permanently frozen ground of the high steppe. The tomb is now fully integrated into the region's natural cryochamber. And so we return to the great lingering question. Was this miraculous preservation a complete accident? A perfect storm of geology and climate? Or did the Pazyryk tomb builders have an intuitive, genius-level understanding of their environment, intentionally creating a tomb that they knew would flood and freeze? We will likely never know. But whether by design or by divine chance, her house of eternity is now a vault of ice. Sealed by ice and guarded by time, the maiden begins her long, silent sleep, waiting for a world she could never have imagined to finally wake her. For 25 centuries, she slept in her house of ice, a silent queen in a frozen kingdom. The world above turned, empires rose and fell, languages were born and died, and the Pazyryk people themselves faded into the mists of time. Then, in the summer of 1993, a new kind of light, brighter and more curious than the sun, fell upon her. And a new kind of shaman, dressed in lab coats and armed with microscopes, began to read the secrets held within her very cells. Waking a 2,500-year-old sleeper is no simple task. The entire block of ice containing her sarcophagus had to be painstakingly helicoptered out of the remote Altai highlands and transported to a specialized laboratory in Novosibirsk. It was a frantic race against time, a desperate effort to move her from her ancient natural freezer to a modern electric one without a moment's thaw. Once there, under the bright, sterile lights of the lab, a new kind of excavation began. This was the birth of the science of paleogenomics, a field that has revolutionized our understanding of the past. Scientists were no longer just looking at her bones and artifacts. They could now read the very code of her life. The first great revelation came from her DNA. A tiny sample of preserved tissue was enough to sequence her mitochondrial DNA, the genetic information passed down from mother to child. The results were startling. She was not, as some had speculated, related to the peoples of Mongolia or China. Her genetic lineage was unequivocally European. She belonged to the vast family of Western Eurasians who had been migrating across the steppes for millennia. While her European genetic profile is clear, geneticists and archaeologists still debate the precise migration routes and timelines that brought her ancestors to the Altai Mountains, a complex puzzle of human movement across the vast Eurasian continent over thousands of years. The modern tools also gave a final, definitive answer to the mystery of her death. The MRI scans, which you learned about earlier, provided the clear diagnosis: advanced breast cancer with metastases to her spine. They also confirmed evidence of injuries consistent with a fall. The story written in her cells was one of debilitating illness followed by a final, traumatic injury. Isotope analysis of a lock of her hair could even tell scientists about her diet in the final months of her life, confirming the pastoralist menu of meat and milk products, but also revealing periods of stress where she may not have been eating at all. Even the humble material she was buried with had stories to tell. When botanists examined the grasses used to stuff her mummified body, they weren't just looking at generic packing material. They could identify the specific species of sedges and herbs. This allowed them to act as pollen detectives. By knowing when these particular plants bloomed and were harvested in the Altai, they could determine with incredible precision that she was buried in the late spring or early summer, probably in the month of June. A detail of her story, lost for millennia, was recovered from a handful of dried grass. This scientific gaze is an intimate one. We now know the secrets of her genetic code, the nature of the disease that ravaged her body, the season of her death. We know things her own people, with all their spiritual insight, could not have known. But this profound, almost invasive level of knowledge comes with an equally profound responsibility. For in waking her, in revealing her secrets, the scientists had also removed her from her sacred resting place, a decision that would soon spark a controversy that burns to this day. That profound, intimate knowledge gained in the laboratory came with a profound responsibility, and it became the heart of a conflict that smolders to this day. It is a clash between the scientific desire to know and the spiritual need to honor the dead. For the modern-day people of the Altai Republic, the indigenous Turkic people who call this land home, the Ice Maiden was not a specimen. She was and is an ancestor. To them, she is not the Ukok princess. They call her Ak-Kadin, the White Lady, or Princess Kadin. She is the mythical progenitor of their people, a powerful shamaness left to stand as an eternal guardian, protecting the land from the forces of the lower world. The Ukok Plateau is not just a high-altitude pasture, it is a sacred space, the second layer of heaven, and the Kurgans are not archaeological sites, but the hallowed graves of their direct spiritual forebears. Her removal, in their eyes, was a profound act of desecration. Many local people believe that the series of natural disasters that struck the region in the years following her excavation, including a major earthquake and severe floods, were a direct result of the guardian being taken from her post, her anger and sorrow shaking the very foundations of the land. For 2 decades, her body remained in the Scientific Institute in Novosibirsk, hundreds of miles from her mountain home. To the Altai elders and shamans, her spirit was trapped, unable to rest, unable to perform its sacred duty. A long and passionate campaign began, a struggle for repatriation that became a powerful symbol for indigenous rights in Russia. The shaman who led many of these efforts claimed to be in direct communication with her spirit, reporting that she was cold and longed to return home to protect her people from the encroaching darkness. This was not a scientific or legal dispute for them. It was a spiritual emergency. This global movement for the repatriation of ancestral remains is one of the most important developments in modern archaeology, forcing museums and institutions worldwide to confront the colonial legacy of their collections. In 2012, the Altai campaign won a partial victory. The maiden's remains were finally returned to the Altai Republic, but she was not reburied on the high plateau. Instead, a special high-tech mausoleum was constructed for her within the National Museum in the regional capital, Gorno-Altaysk. She rests there today in a climate-controlled sarcophagus, shielded from view except for a few days a year. For the scientific community, this is a respectful compromise, preserving a priceless source of knowledge while honoring her as a cultural treasure. But for many traditional Altai, the journey is not over. A body in a museum is not a body at rest. They believe that only by returning her to the frozen earth of her original Kurgan can the spiritual balance of the land be restored, and only then can her soul and their world finally be at peace. The case of the Ice Maiden crystallizes a fundamental ethical debate in modern archaeology. Who ultimately owns the past, and where is the line between valuable scientific inquiry and the respectful treatment of the dead, especially when those dead are the revered ancestors of a living culture? There are no easy answers. And so, Ak-Kadin, the White Lady of the Altai, continues her long sleep, a silent icon of a lost world, and a powerful symbol of a living people's struggle for their soul. And so our long journey together tonight comes to a gentle, quiet close. We have walked the high pastures of the Altai, felt the biting wind on our faces, and sat beside the fire in a felt yurt, listening to stories that have long since faded into the air. We have witnessed the meticulous creation of a house for eternity, and the even more meticulous work of science as it sought to understand the woman who was laid to rest there. We have traveled across 2.5 millennia, from a world of mythic beasts and shamanic journeys to a modern world of genetic sequencing and ethical debate, all centered on one silent, sleeping woman. The story of the Ice Maiden is a powerful reminder that the past is never truly past. It is a living presence that sleeps just beneath the surface of our world, waiting for the right moment to be discovered, to be understood, to be argued over, and hopefully, to be respected. As you begin to drift off now, perhaps you can picture her not in a museum case but as her people do. A powerful guardian, at peace in her frozen kingdom, her spirit finally free to ride the starry steppes alongside her magnificent horses. Let the silence of the high mountains be a comfort, and let the deep, unbroken sleep of the ages be your own.